And we're live. Hey, everybody. This is Prince Tyler. Now, tonight I'm hosting a debate and going to be the moderator of the debate about whether or not Israelis are colonizers. And my main participants for tonight are King Crocoduck and TaeTae. And so, before we start the debate, we're going to start with the introductions that will last for 2 minutes, starting with TaeTae and her, introduction, like what's her background. So, go ahead, TaeTae.
Hi, I am known as TaeTae online, and I largely debate and espouse leftist politics. Of course, my position on this whole issue is basically colored by that. I am also, for full disclosure, very much a religious skeptic. I am agnostic. I have a very extensive Catholic Christian background, and I am very hypercritical of at least the religious aspect of this topic, but of most things in general. So if it's about religious questions, I debate those things. If it's about leftist ideology and leftist politics, I am strongly in favor of them, and I'm usually seen online on Twitter arguing these things all the time. My position on this issue is that Israel is 100% a colonial state. It was installed there by European forces and the capital of the global north, and it only remains there and continues to exist with the help and the backing of that same capital. So it was very purposefully done. There is a very clear history.
Uh, sorry, Tate. Sorry, it's like past 2 minutes, but try to wrap it up a little bit.
Oh no! I was going into the introduction.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my introduction's over then.
Okay.
But yeah, you get it.
All right, let's go to King Crocoduck. So 2 minutes, King Crocoduck.
Hello, everyone. My name's King Crocoduck Online, and I've run a YouTube channel for a while now where I've been teaching science and debunking pseudoscience and talking a lot about the philosophy of science. These things are only tangentially related to politics, but they do have some application insofar as I talk about things like epistemology and standards of evidence. I've never done a debate quite like this before, which is entirely in terms of history and politics. But I think that a lot of the lessons that I've learned and thought about over the years in terms of philosophy and epistemology do carry over when evaluating competing narratives over what happened and what's going on. My politics, I wouldn't say that I have a positive right-wing vision or anything like that. Most of my engagement with politics has been criticism of what I think are overextensions of left-wing politics, not even in terms of any particular policies, but in terms of their conceptualization of the world and the tools they use to diagnose world problems. I would say that probably my interface with politics begins and ends with how things are explained rather than how what actions need to be taken. I am someone who attempts to understand and interpret the world instead of having a positive vision for how to change it.
All right, so before we begin the debate, I'm going to tell my audience the format in the show. That way, you guys in the audience can actually, understand what exactly going to happen. So, for the first, 20 minutes, we're going to basically have, of course, the two people do their affirmation. King Crocoduck would have 10 minutes, and TaeTae would have 10 minutes. After they do the affirmation, what they would do next is do the rebuttal. King Crocoduck has 10 minutes, TaeTae has 10 minutes. And you can say the rebuttal period, what we're going to do is a crosstalk where both TaeTae and King Crocoduck are just going to go back and forth for 40 minutes. And then after that 40 minutes, we're going to actually answer you guys' questions in the chat to, answer the questions that you guys have. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to use this timer. I'm going to start it for 10 minutes for TaeTae first to make her position loud and clear. After the timer goes off, it's King Crocoduck's time. So let's start with TaeTae. Your 10 minutes starts right now.
Okay. So again, I just want to reiterate my position on this issue. It's a deeply, deeply complicated issue because there seems to be some sort of misconception that if you believe that a group of people are ancestral to a particular land, it gives you the right to go back there and erase the people that are already living there and call that place your own personal state. And to me, there are so many reasons why what the right wing government of Israel is and what it is doing fits the definition of colonialism. First of all, the vast majority of people living in Israel today are not actually the descendants of people who were chased away from Judea several thousand years ago. There have been very little studies showing that the people that are currently there, basically Ashkenazi Jews and Jews that are basically European installments, they genetically have more in common with Northern Europe than they do with the people of that land. So that's number one. Number two, the people who established the Jewish state of Israel, the really unfortunate thing is that cultures change, right? What was considered great and wonderful 100 years ago is no longer considered wonderful today, because now we're living in the age of information and cameras, and we can truly see what colonialism is and what it does. And back then, there wasn't that big of a criticism against colonialism. So they proudly said that what they were doing was a colonial project. They said it in various different writings. They were proud to call what they were doing colonialism. Now that it is unpopular and has a negative connotation, they want to turn around and say, oh no, it's what we're doing is not colonialism. We are just returning to our ancestral land. I am going to spend the majority of my time debunking these arguments because I think that they're flimsy and paper thin. I think that religious arguments about who God said that land belongs to is a really peripheral and not relevant to the fact that you have one group of people that has the backing of the global north basically ethnically cleansing another group of people. I don't think that has anything to do with anyone's perception of God. So it is a colonial state. It continues to be a colonial state. It is even an apartheid state because they have used a minority of people to crush the majority until the majority became the minority. So there are a lot of reasons, evidences, writings, admissions to the fact that Israel was a colonial state until it became unpopular to continue saying that. And I think that after I go through some of the writings of the people who created and founded Israel, where they said over and over again that it is colonialism and they have the right to do it, then no one could ever really make the argument that Israel is not a colonial state. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to restart the timer, and I'm just going to go to hold on, about 10 minutes for King Crocoduck. So King Crocoduck, you may begin right now.
All right. Well, my position that Israel is not a colonial project rests upon the simple fact that it does not satisfy the definition of colonialism, which entails the subjugation and occupation of one nation by another for the purpose of exploiting it economically. Israel falls short of meeting the requirements for colonialism because it does not and never did economically exploit any of the native Arabs in the land, nor plunder it of resources. To the contrary, wherever Israel has engaged economically with local Arab nations, it has also always done so in the interest of fostering peace and stability in the region and at the expense of its own capital. For example, in the aftermath of the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel preemptively defended itself against an imminent multinational Arab war of extermination, in which Israel temporarily tripled in size by seizing the Sinai Peninsula, an oil-rich region that had belonged to Egypt. Rather than immediately setting up mining operations and becoming an oil empire, Israel opted instead to trade back the land to the formerly aggressive nation of Egypt in exchange for a lasting peace deal, which continues to this day. Contrary to the behavior that would be expected of any colonial power in history, Israel exchanged the oil-rich land for peace. Another example is the unilateral withdrawal from another territory captured during the 1967 war. In 2005, Israel attempted to pursue peace with its neighbors by repeating this kind of territorial exchange deal, this time with Gaza, as per the Oslo Accords. Israel did this by unilaterally deporting 9,000 of its own citizens from the region. It left behind greenhouses, a thriving flower industry, and exorbitant international subsidies for Gazans to economically thrive in the hope that its Palestinian citizens would recognize the benefits of making peace with Israel, just as Egypt had. Contrary to the behavior that would be expected of any colonial power in history, Israel exchanged the coastal territory for peace. This effort was in vain. Following the withdrawal, the Palestinians looted the greenhouses, liquidated all Israeli assets in Gaza, and elected Hamas, an Islamist jihadi movement that proceeded to immediately murder its rival Fatah members and enact a campaign of terror against the citizens of Gaza, forcing them into compliance with its exterminationist will. Rather than turn Gaza, with its white beaches and Arabic cuisine, into a thriving tourist destination, a Monte Carlo of the Middle East, Gaza elected to dismantle its own infrastructure to fire rockets at civilian centers in Israel. As an understandable security measure, Israel responded with a blockade over Gaza in an effort to prevent the import of weapons and militia, which remains in place to this day. There are these two episodes, but there are many more episodes like this, but these two are representative of Israel's policy towards its Arab neighbors generally, which is to offer economic and territorial incentives for the establishment of peace and stability in the region, even when doing so comes at Israel's economy's expense. These are not the behaviors of a colonial power that seeks the economic exploitation of its neighbors. They are the conduct of a mature and responsible nation-state that seeks peace and stability in a highly contested part of the world. The legal status of the West Bank and Gaza, which were captured in the 1967 war, are in limbo due to the fact that Jordan and Egypt both ceded their claims to these territories, meaning that Israel's occupation has always been over regions which were never home to a sovereign Palestinian nation. Indeed, a sovereign Palestinian nation has never existed anywhere in the world, despite Israel repeatedly expressing its support for the existence of one on the condition that Palestine makes peace with Israel. The reason why Palestinians don't have a sovereign nation is because they've repeatedly rejected partition deals which would have granted them national sovereignty. They rejected the Transjordan Memorandum in 1922, where they were offered 3/4 of mandatory Palestine, including the entirety of what eventually became Jordan. They rejected the 1937 partition proposed by the Peel Commission, the 1939 Unitary White Paper proposal, the 1947 UN Partition Plan, the 1979 Egypt negotiations, the 2000 proposal where Ehud Barak offered 97% of the West Bank and 100% of Gaza, and Ehud Olmert's 2008 proposal, where he offered to withdraw from almost all of the West Bank and partition Jerusalem demographically. The reason why Palestine rejected all these offers is because Palestine has always, to varying degrees, rejected the legitimacy of a sovereign Jewish presence anywhere in the Levant. This is encapsulated by the genocidal slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," the English translation of the literal Arabic, which states the genocidal intent even more clearly: "Water to water, Palestine will be purified." Ideologically entrenched opponents of Israel's right to exist have cited its settler movement as evidence of colonialism in an effort to retroactively redefine the meaning of colonialism so as to disingenuously associate Israel's conduct with that of actual colonial powers. This is not only an abuse of language, in which an entirely novel form of colonialism is invented out of whole cloth for the sole purpose of tarnishing Israel with a libelous and stigmatic smear, but it also ignores the history of the region and erases the injustices leveled by the local Arabs against the native Jews. Prior to the fall of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I, Jewish communities in what is now called the West Bank had existed as oppressed second-class dhimmis under the yoke of various Islamic empires that had conquered the region. Hebron, an especially important site for the Jewish nation, was home to at least 8 centuries worth of Jewish families, who were only able to maintain the Jewish connection to that land, which had once been home to the ancient kingdom of Israel, because Jews from around the world would send money to support them, generation after generation. The local Arab population had always engaged in periodic violence and aggression against the local Jews, but these escalated into regular acts of terrorism and mass murder from 1920 onwards, prior to the invention of Israel, by the way, as Jewish refugees from increasingly anti-Semitic European nations substantially increased the Jewish immigration rate, which had previously consisted almost exclusively of religious pilgrims. This new influx of westernized, secularized Jews enraged the traditional imperialistic locals, who regarded all conquered lands under Islamic empires as permanently belonging to Arabs, and thus subject to the laws that establish non-Arabs as a second-class citizen. These secular liberal Jewish immigrants, with their modern rhetoric about equal protection under the law, alienated the pre-modern sensibilities of the local Arabs, whose leaders periodically whipped them up into a frenzy and led them to commit atrocities against the Jews. The Arab-provoked violence reached its apotheosis in 1929 with the massacre of Hebron, in which the local Arabs butchered and mutilated 70 Jewish civilians, burning down their synagogues and plundering their shops. This culminated in the ethnic cleansing of the entire city, putting a violent end to that ancient Jewish community. Similar episodes of ethnic cleansing had occurred against the Jews earlier, including in Gaza in 1921, and would persist into the future, including Beit She'an, I'm probably mispronouncing that, in 1936. A comprehensive list would include over a dozen settlements populated by both ancient and recently immigrated Jewish communities. The post-1967 resettlement of Hebron and other similarly affected regions in the West Bank is not an act of settler colonial aggression, as anti-Israel advocates claim, but the correction of an injustice inflicted by the local Arabs, whose genocidal aspirations and actions have never since receded, as was all too clearly on display during last month's pogrom. I bring up Hebron as being illustrative of a general trend of denial, historical negation, and the projection of Palestinian sins onto Jews. Indeed, this denial, erasure, and projection is central to the national identity of this particular group of Arabs, and nowhere is this clearer than in their choice of name for themselves: Palestinians. The name Palestine was given to the region first by the Roman Empire, after they conquered and expelled the native Jews to erase any memory of Jewish connection to the land, thereby condemning them to 2,000 years of exile and oppression in foreign lands. The region was conquered and renamed a dozen times thereafter, and then finally named Palestine once more by the British colonial power, who took control after World War I. And that imperial power ultimately wound up restricting the return of Jews to their homeland during the Holocaust, so as to appease the local Arabs and maintain geopolitical influence in the region. The irony that the Arab nation, whose very name and national identity is the product of 2,000 years of imperial and colonial aggression against the land's indigenous Jewish inhabitants, also happens to be the nation that happens to be claimed that claims to be engaged in an anti-imperial and anti-colonial struggle against the Jewish state, is almost comical. In summary, Israel does not satisfy the definition of colonialism as a means of oppressing and subjugating another group for the purposes of economic exploitation, nor does it satisfy the contrived and disingenuous redefinition with the added settler adjective, settler colonialism, and any claims to the contrary function to erase the history of institutionalized Arab violence against the Jews and inverts the anti-colonial project of righting historic injustices, including, but by no means limited to, undoing the ethnic cleansing of Hebron. The smear that Israel is a colonial project is not a sincere attempt at faithfully representing the nature of the conflict in the Middle East, but is rather a cynical effort by Palestinian organizations and activists to recruit international support for the realization of their genocidal ambition, to purify the Levant of a sovereign Jewish presence, water to water, or, in the English formulation, to free the Levant of its liberal democratic Jewish aberration, from the river to the sea.
All right, it's going to be TaeTae's turn, so let me try to reset the timer for 10 minutes for her rebuttal. So, TaeTae, you begin right now. TaeTae?
You're muted.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, I heard a lot of the things that he was saying, and to me, this is the majority of what he was saying is minutia about different peace agreements that Israel agreed to.
I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing
Yeah,
TaeTae.
yeah, I'm gonna stop the timer right now. TaeTae, your mic is kind of breaking up right now. No, it's kind of cutting out.
Okay.
All right, try speaking in the mic again. TaeTae? No, like, so, okay, what you're gonna do, TaeTae, just try to leave wait, try talking right now.
Hello?
Alright. It's still kind of breaking out a little bit, so can you try to rejoin the chat, and then we'll have your time go up, okay? Yeah, join again, please. Please join again, because the mic is kind of just breaking out.
Okay.
So, so while we wait for, like, TaeTae, we're gonna just, I guess, maybe respond to, like, some of the stuff that's in the chat. So basically, this comment says right here, Dimes from Switzerland in this debate. I don't think she's going to be able to do this rebuttal. She is set for a good case. And of course, yeah, someone else also mentioned about the audio. And so we're gonna wait for her to come back, in that way she could do her rebuttal. Because unfortunately, the rebuttal is like really hard for her to hear. And yeah, basically reset our cider. Yeah, I'm gonna do reset it right now once she comes back. So no worry about that, guys. The internet, let's see, like this comment says right here that the internet decided to seize her argument for us. Okay. All right,
I'm
TaeTae.
sorry, am I being heard?
Yeah, much better. Much better, TaeTae.
Much
Okay.
better. Okay.
All right, so TaeTae, you'll do your rebuttal right now.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to open this in my browser. Sorry, I tried to open it in my browser and I was kicked out. Do you hear me now?
Yes, much better, TaeTae. All right, you want to do your rebuttal right now?
Yes, I do. Okay. So, okay, so I heard a lot of what I'm sorry, you're King? Should I just call you King Croc? Okay.
Please don't call me King. Casey.
Casey, okay. I heard a lot of the arguments that Casey made, and respectfully, I feel like this is details of what Israel did after they colonized that land. So you can make these arguments about how charitable Israel may not have been at one period of time, but the crux of the argument is, do they have a right to be there to begin with? And the answer.
Oh no. Yeah, I'm gonna stop. TaeTae, you broke out again.
I'm guessing she was going to go on to say the answer to that is no, but I'd be curious to hear the rest of her rebuttal.
Yeah, TaeTae, we cannot hear you at all.
I don't know what to do. Oh, okay.
Okay,
Hold on.
much better. Yes,
I hear you.
like that. Yeah, right there.
Okay, so again, Israel colonized that land. So all of these different things that they did after they colonized the land does not change the fact that they colonized the land. And let's go back to 1916. basically the British and the French needed help getting the Ottoman Empire the hell up out of there. And so they had made a promise to the Arab populations there at the time that if they helped them defeat the Ottoman Empire, that the people already living in that land would have authority over the Arabian authority and sovereignty over the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. Okay, they
TaeTae, you're muted again. TaeTae. Can you hear us, TaeTae?
I'm here. Do you not hear me at all?
Yeah. We can hear you, but wherever you are, like, stay at that connection spot right there because I don't know where if you're moving or not, but sometimes it goes out for like a minute or so. So stay where you are.
Okay, so I'm not moving, and
All right.
I don't know. I'm going to try to stay as still as possible. Okay.
All right.
Um, so instead of fulfilling the promises that they made to the Arabs living there at the time, they turned around and reneged. And um, and at the time, um, being a colonial state and being known as a colonial state was not an embarrassment for them. Okay, so we have to go back to a guy named Theodore Herzl. He is known as the spiritual father of Israel. He is a very popular figure within Israel. They have a national holiday named after him. They do credit him as one of the people that founded Israel. And
Okay, so TaeTae, you cut out again. By any chance, do you have any sort of desktop near you? TaeTae.
hold on. I will go on my desktop and see if that's better, okay?
Yeah, okay. So while you're doing the desktop, I'll reset the timer for you, and I'm just gonna answer the question while we wait for you, okay? Some of the
Okay.
comments. Yeah. All right. So okay, so comments right here say like, what time would it be? KC predated year, shouldn't too far off. Okay. So like this one also says right here, sorry, Prince Tyler, I'll stop muting her. Okay. Uh, this comment says right here, I hope we don't have to suspend this due to technical issues. Right now, I'm hoping to go do some stuff and listen, but I want to get going before I go. Yeah, sometimes you just, have to love technology. Like, some days it works, other days it doesn't necessarily work. So I'm trying my hardest, like, making sure that it's gonna work just as fine. So don't worry about it, guys. I'll try to, do that. Let's see. This comment says, note the internet decided to seize things again. Okay. Let's see some other comments right here. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna reset the timer once she comes back. So when she comes back, we're gonna hear what she has to say for sure, for sure. And if it doesn't necessarily work again, I guess maybe we had to might delay the stream. I don't want to delay it, but it's not working right now, unfortunately. So let's see. Any other comments right there? So yeah, you're cutting out wildly. Yes, getting like a lot of influence from the audio. Yes. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. So this comment says, "Hello, friend. Hey, you're kind of like missing out on the good parts, like I guess about like the audio getting cut out." Hello from Miami. Yeah, I want to go to Miami. Like, it's kind of fun, to go there someday. Like, I went to like Orlando. I also went to like Jacksonville. So that's actually pretty good. So yeah, it's like you sound good. Yeah, it's not necessarily my audio that I'm concerned about. It's actually TaeTae's audio that we're basically concerned about because when she's trying to do her rebuttal, is not necessarily working right now. So we're gonna wait for her, and then she'll do her rebuttal, and we'll continue the debate from there. It's like Miami is fine. Just watch for the bad drivers. Trust me. That's kind of funny because, like, I think, it's the same thing for other places too. Like, my girlfriend, she's from Panama, and she also mentioned how basically like a lot of bad drivers in like those places too. So, bad driving is like, something really bad there. Very, very, very bad. So TaeTae, are you close to your desktop yet?
I am at my desktop. I'm signing in right now. So just a couple more minutes.
Wait. I think your voice is actually working right now.
No, it's still from my phone. So let me get in on my desktop because I'll talk and then you'll tell me that it's cutting out. So let me just get in from my desktop.
All right. Okay. Let's see. For context, I lived there for almost a decade. Wow. It's kind of interesting because I've never been to Miami. Never, ever, ever been to like, been there. Like, have you been to Miami, Crocoduck?
I have. It's nice. I say that as a West Coaster, so I'm willing to cede some pride here and say that Miami is actually they've got nicer beaches than Los Angeles, with the exception of Malibu. But it's Malibu.
Right. I mean, like the thing about Florida is like the best part of Florida. Like every time I go, it's not necessarily Miami. It's mostly like Orlando because they have like all the theme parks, like Disney, Universal, and so nowadays I tend to just prefer Universal, just going there and just going on the rides, like the Spider-Man ride. I like that one a lot. Like I think the Incredible Hulk ride, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
I don't think
like a lot of so
I don't think I've ever actually been to Orlando. Maybe when I was a very young child. But yeah, yeah, I like Miami. I like strolling down past the shops and pretending to be Scarface on my way to a failed drug deal.
All right, we have TaeTae. So test your mic right now.
Can you hear me? Am I
Perfect.
being heard?
Perfect.
Okay, this is the desktop. If this does not work, I am sorry. I don't know what else to tell you. We're just gonna have to give up.
All right. So what we're gonna do, TaeTae, I'll reset your timer to 10 minutes. That we can do your rebuttal.
Okay. Where is the mic button? Oh, I see it. Okay. It's hard to find on the desktop, but I found it.
All right, you can go.
1 second. Okay. Okay, so I heard Casey make a lot of points about how nice and generous Israel was to the surrounding population after they colonized the land. But it doesn't change the fact that the foundation of Israel's existence in the land in the first place was a colonial project, and they weren't even ashamed enough to not admit that from the beginning. So, back then, colonialism didn't have the negative connotation that it did today. And so they had no problems admitting what they were doing. So the history of this is actually, first of all, let's talk about the fact that the British and the French had promised Arab leadership and sovereignty over the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant if they promised to help defeat the Ottoman and the Ottoman Empire. The Arab population of that time fulfilled their end of the bargain, but Britain did not. Okay, and I say Britain really because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Britain is the country that controlled Palestine at the time. Okay, and what was happening in Europe at the time was this Zionist project to create a Jewish state. We go back to a man named Theodor Herzl. He is known as the spiritual father of Israel. He is a very popular and influential figure within his Israeli history. He has a day named after him, and he is credited as the person who founded Israel. And in 1896, he published a pamphlet known as the Jewish State. Within the Jewish State pamphlet, he makes it very known and very clear what his intentions are, which is basically to beg England to help him colonize Palestine and create a Jewish state. And all throughout the pamphlet, he calls these endeavors things like the Jewish Colonial Trust, Colonization Commission, Palestine Land Development, Jewish Colonialization Association. Because back then, it wasn't necessarily shameful to admit that you were trying to move a group of people off their land. Okay. In this pamphlet, he also reached out to Joseph Chamberlain, which was the colonial secretary of Britain at the time, Cecil Rhodes, another Zionist and colonialist who helped colonize various parts of Africa, Zambia and South Africa specifically. And a generation later, we have Vladimir Jabotinsky. I'm not going to pronounce his name well. But anyway, he published something known as the Iron Law. So let's read what the Iron Law is for a second, because even he knew that colonialization would not be possible without forcibly removing those people and stealing their land. He said, "It is utterly impossible to obtain the voluntary consent of the Palestinian Arabs for converting Palestine from an Arab country into a country with a Jewish majority. My readers have a general idea of the history of colonization in other countries. I suggest they consider all the precedents with which they are acquainted and see whether there is one solitary instance of colonization being carried on with the consent of the native population. There is no such precedent. This is equally true of the Arabs. They feel at least the same instinctive jealous love of Palestine as the old Aztecs felt for ancient Mexico and the Sioux for their rolling prairies. Every native population in the world resists colonists as long as it has the slightest hope of being able to rid itself of the danger of being colonized. That is what the Arabs of Palestine are doing and what they will persist in doing as long as there remains a solitary spark of hope that they will be able to prevent the transformation of Palestine into the land of Israel." So they were very clear. Then he talks about something called the Iron Law. Let's examine the Iron Law. The Iron Law of every colonizing movement, a law which knows of no exceptions, a law which existed in all times and under all circumstances. If you wish to colonize a land in which people are already living, you must provide a garrison on your behalf, or else you give up your colonization, for without an armed force that will render physically impossible any attempts to destroy or prevent this colonization, colonization is impossible. Not, quote, difficult, not, quote, dangerous, but impossible. Zionism is a colonizing adventure, and therefore it stands or falls by question of armed force. And then we go back to Theodor Herzl. We're going back to the Jewish State, the pamphlet that started this whole project. And he basically painted this whole project as something that needed to be done to rid the area of Palestinian barbarism and bring European legitimacy to the area. He says, we should there form a portion of the rampant of Europe against Asia, an outpost of civilization as opposed to barbarism. We should, as a neutral state, remain in contact with all of Europe, which would have to guarantee our existence. So they knew from the very start that in order to create a Jewish state, they would have to displace and kill the population already living there. So everything you have said that Israel has done after that is largely irrelevant because the foundation of Israel was a very purposeful attempt to erase the people living there. And I am running out of time. So the next time I speak, I will tell you why Israel really doesn't have a leg to stand on, even in the claims that they are returning to their ancestral land. Because that is also a very false argument that they are perpetrating to excuse ethnically cleansing the people that already live there. And so, again, you also named a number of agreements that Palestine didn't agree to out of the kindness of Israel's heart without mentioning all the agreements that Israel didn't agree to, of which there were close to a dozen. So I really don't think that your points hold water because at the end of the day, what Israel chose to do after the Nakba, after displacing 700,000 people from their homes, and what it continues to do in order to justify its existence is morally and reprehensibly wrong. But the problem with this whole situation is that these things are not really decided by who is right and wrong. What decides these sort of actions, what decides who the winners and losers are who has the capital. And Israel, if it had such a right to exist, should have been fighting these battles itself. But no, that's not what it did. It attached itself to Europe, it attached itself to the United States, and continues to use the capital of these countries to legitimize its existence and murder and massacre the natives of that land.
All right, so it's time for King Crocoduck to do his rebuttal. So about 10 minutes for him to begin right now.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
Loud and
All
clear.
right. Perfect. Okay. So it seems like the core of the argument, as I understand it so far, is that Israel can be understood as a colonial project because there are quotes from the pamphlet, The Jewish State, that Herzl wrote in the 1870s, which suggests that a colonial project was taking place. And there are things like the Jewish Colonization Association and so on. The word colonialism was used in the course of describing whatever it was that was going on prior to the formation of the state of Israel, and presumably there is some plan, there's some contrived, there's some conspiracy taking place. I'm not saying like conspiracy. I'm saying like the people are conspiring to do a bad thing. They are conspiring to ethnically cleanse the local population. They are conspiring to use violence and displace people. And there are a few things to say in response to that. First of all, Herzl was writing in the 1870s, and the British Mandate began in the 1920s. A lot of time passed between those 2 points in time, and not everything that he recommended was implemented. Straight off the bat, for example, he recommended making a Jewish state in Argentina. What Theodor Herzl is known for, the reason why he is revered by Zionists, by Israel, is because he modernized the Jewish national identity. He transformed it from its pre-modern identity as a priestly monarchy that was steeped in religious practice into a modern secular national identity which could make a legitimate claim to a nation state. The justification for Israel's existence is the same as the justification for any other state's existence, which is that every nation has a right to have a state in its ancestral homeland. But putting that off to the side, if you actually read the context of what Herzl wrote, he never suggests applying violence in order to achieve the development of the Jewish nation. And indeed, if you read Zionist literature, if you look, for example, at the text, the minutes of the and the speeches given in the first Zionist Congress, if you look at the public writings of Theodor Herzl, if you look at the Balfour Declaration, the subsequent Zionist congresses, even the Declaration of Independence of Israel, they all say essentially the same thing. And I'm going to read a portion of the text from the Declaration of Independence. It says, "The state of Israel will promote the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants, will be based on the precepts of liberty, justice, and peace taught by the Hebrew prophets, will uphold the full social and political equality of all its citizens without distinction of race, creed, or sex, will guarantee full freedom of conscience, worship, education, and culture, will safeguard the sanctity and inviolability of shrines and holy places of all religions, and will dedicate itself to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations." So the idea that there was a plan that was put into place over the course of these decades to forcibly remove the native Arab population, it's just not true. No such recommendation was issued, at least not broadly by Zionists prior to the year 1920. After 1920, when violence against the native Jewish population was escalated into full-blown pogroms and mass murders, you had the reaction of extremist groups beginning to form, and some of them may have said some things, but it would be disingenuous if you have this entire constellation of different things that people in this movement said, and you took the non-representative quotes, or you took quotes that are representative but that are decontextualized and misleading, and used that to build a case that Israel that the Zionists in the region had a plan to engage in the ethnic cleansing of the Arab population. We can talk about the Nakba in some detail, and we can talk about what actually happened in contrast to the typical Palestinian narrative for what happened. But the suggestion that there was a premeditated effort spanning over the course of all these decades, beginning with Theodor Herzl, to forcibly remove the Arabs. I mean, in his pamphlet, if you read the whole thing, you'll see that his suggestion for the way to go about creating the demographics necessary to support a Jewish state is not by killing the native population or by forcing them out or anything like that, but by offering economic incentives for them to move outside of the borders of wherever this state was going to be it in Argentina or wherever. Concerning the names of things like the Jewish Colonization Association or whatever, it is true that the Zionists did attach themselves to whatever imperial or colonial power happened to be in power. So first it was the Ottoman Empire. They're like, "Hey, Ottomans, we want to buy some lands. Could you please institute some land reforms? We want to be able to, start moving some people in. We want to be able to start owning our own property." And the Ottoman Empire was fine with this, and you had the movement of the first Zionists coming in the 1880s before the British colonists came in and started, before the Jews had to deal with them as well. And when you're interfacing with different empires and different colonizers, you kind of have to play ball with them. You kind of have to adopt their symbols and their words and their names. But if you get right down to the bottom of it, there was no actual colonization taking place. There was no plundering of the land. There was no exploitation of the native inhabitants. Jews would legally buy land, and this happened all the way from the 1880s to 1948. They would legally purchase land. They would move in. They would fire the Arabs and hire Jews, and the local Arab population would respond to the influx of these more secular, more modern Jews with violence and with pogroms and with massacres. And Jews began defending themselves, and from there you have this spiral of violence cycling out of control until eventually you end up with the 1948 war. The details of how all of that escalated, again, we can hash it out during the discussion, but it's not correct to suggest that the Jews were in any way the aggressors in this enterprise. It was literally people moved in, they purchased land. Arabs didn't like that. They started attacking the Jews. Jews began defending themselves. And this has been the story of the region pretty much ever since the 1880s, when the first Zionists began moving into the region. Let's see, what else was mentioned here. Yeah, Israel installed by Europeans in the global north. That's not correct. So Britain actually became quite anti-Zionist, to the point where they even severely curtailed Jewish immigration just as the Holocaust was happening. So, the moment Jews needed access to their homeland the most, it was closed to them, and this certainly played no small part in the appalling death counts in the Holocaust. And this inspired Jewish terror organizations to start attacking the British colonizers, to kick them the hell out. And understandably so. Although, yeah, the methods and means by which they went about doing this, not great. I'm not endorsing terrorism, but it's important to make note of this, because if the suggestion is that Israel and Britain had conspired to colonize the local population, this runs contrary to the available historical record, which shows that it was actually Britain was looking out for Britain's interests. And the local Jews and the local Arabs, it was promising both of them land. It was promising both of them their own states, but it was reneging on promises on both ends, and it had to deal with violence from both factions. And in the end, when it came to the UN partition plan in 1947, Britain actually abstained from the vote altogether, because by then it had become completely anti-Zionist. So, there's a lot of complicated twists and turns to the story, and the simple story being told that Israel was a colonial project done by Europeans to the local Arab population, it only makes sense, A, if you take a very low resolution view of what happened, and B, you omit critical details about things that happened. It doesn't make sense to say that the British were conspiring with the Jews when they essentially allowed the Holocaust to happen to them. It doesn't make sense to say that the British were conspiring with the Jews when they abstained from the vote that would have partitioned the land by the United Nations. It doesn't make sense to say that. There are a lot of things to look at, and again, we can go into more detail. Just a couple quick points in these few seconds we have left there. So it was asserted that most Israelis are Ashkenazi and European. This is not correct. The majority of Israelis are refugees who were chased out of neighboring Arab countries when they were ethnically cleansed of their Jews back in the middle of the 20th century. But as I have 10 seconds left, we can't go really into detail about demographics just yet. So I guess we'll just have to move on to the discussion section.
All right, so let's gonna start with TaeTae's rebuttal, and then after that, we're gonna do the discussion for 40 minutes. So
Wait,
TaeTae for 10 minutes.
Hold on. TaeTae did her rebuttal. Remember?
Oh yeah, she did. Sorry, yes, she did. Never mind. So let's do 40 minutes.
We're doing a discussion, right?
Yeah, the discussion. I'm sorry, my bad. It's the discussion right now. So 40 minutes for the discussion. Guys, go ahead.
Okay, so just to respond to some of the things I just heard, it's patently ridiculous to say that you didn't want to violently and forcibly remove the native population from that land when you are writing letters to experts who have done this before violently. If your pamphlet includes letters to people like Joseph Chamberlain and Cecil Rhodes, I find it very difficult to believe that you peaceably wanted to remove those people, given that Cecil Rhodes is the father of apartheid in South Africa.
Well, that's why you have to read the whole thing in context.
And the letters are actually in there, and he was very excitedly telling them that they could be part of history in creating a Jewish state.
Yes, but that doesn't necessarily entail the forcible removal of the Arabs.
Well, okay, so here's some quotes. It says, "We shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment for it in the transit
Yep.
countries while denying it any employment in our own country.
Yep.
Both the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly. Okay, so I
So
want to
they know they're not doing something nice here, right?
I want to stress they are doing this without the permission of the people that actually live there. Okay?
Just a second. So they're buying the land legally, right? I hope there's no dispute that they purchased the land legally, first from the Ottomans and then from the British Mandate when they took over. And then now that they own the land, they get to decide who works on the land. And yes, it's not a nice thing that they're doing. But you know, these are the 1880s to the 1920s, and I'm not saying it. Listen, TaeTae, I'm not saying it's a great thing to buy up land and fire the people who are working there in order to get them to move away. But this is far and away from the kind of murderous business that Cecil Rhodes and friends were engaging in Africa.
Who gave them the right to do that?
The Ottomans first. If you own
the Ottomans that would not be out of power were it not for the Arab fighters that helped oust them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but why is that relevant?
Because the land was promised to those people for their services.
Yeah, the British did a lot of bad shit. I'm not denying it. Look, I mean, the Zionists literally formed terror organizations to kick the colonizing British out of the territory. Like, if you want to say that the British were assholes, I think Zionists will generally agree with you. They were assholes. They should have kept their promise both to the Jews and to the Arabs, and their failure to do so caused a lot of violence and bloodshed.
And then you are saying that Herzl, by the way, this pamphlet came out in 1896, not the.
All right, my mistake, okay. 1890s.
But a dude that came by a generation later, Vladimir Jabotinsky, sorry. The Iron Wall was published in 1923, and it is very obvious from what was written in there that those people would have to be forcibly removed to create a Jewish state.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, you know, you have a plurality of opinion, especially after the 1920s, when Arabs begin committing pogroms against the native Jewish population. Some people are like, you know what, this peaceful business of just buying up the land and evicting people, this isn't going to cut it anymore because these people are literally butchering us. Now, again, I'm not endorsing this view. What I'm saying is that it's not necessarily representative of what Zionists were interested in and what they were talking about. You can look at the texts in all of the Zionist congresses. You can look at the Declaration of Independence, and all of them offer equal protection under the law for whatever Arabs happen to remain in the Jewish portion of the state.
Until the 1920s.
No, this is ongoing. This is even until 1948 with the Declaration of Independence in Israel.
Well, there was clearly a faction that wanted to forcibly remove them, and then also, let's keep in mind.
But there are radical factions in every movement, TaeTae.
Yeah, but which ones had power? The radical faction.
No, this isn't correct. This isn't correct. If the radical factions had power, just hear me out. Just hear me out.
Second, before you continue, let me point out for a second. You seem to insinuate that Europe didn't have any reason to be exporting Jews, but they did.
Wait, I didn't say they didn't have any reason to export Jews.
Well, I seem to have heard earlier that you were saying that the British did not collect large swaths of Jews and send them to Israel.
I don't think I said that.
Okay, I misheard you, right? But the Europeans were actually very excited to do this because it would mean that they could get rid of the Jewish population that existed within Europe.
Yeah.
Because the Europeans didn't want them.
Yeah.
Okay, so my analysis of colonialization is when you take a group of people that are of one land and you very purposefully ship them somewhere else to displace the people that are already living there, and you're stealing their land, their way of life, and the way that they feed themselves. That is colonialization.
Okay, so there are 2 points.
What you do after that is a different question.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. So there are 2 points of contention here. First of all, the idea that you take Jews who are of another land. This is not correct. This is their indigenous homeland. This is the national homeland.
What are you basing that off of?
basing that off of the fact that the homeland is tied to the Jewish national identity, to its national ethos.
The Jews in Europe are not the descendants of Judea. I hope
They don't need to be.
They don't. Oh, okay. So you're saying that if I convert to Judaism tomorrow, I have a right to be a citizen of Israel?
Not necessarily, but if you adopt the national ethos, if you TaeTae, if you
Israeli law,
TaeTae, if you adopt the national ethos,
to Israeli law.
TaeTae, if you adopt the national ethos, then you will very likely be admitted into the Jewish nation, even if you don't believe in Judaism, and even if you don't have any Jewish family. If
Have
you
you read
adopt
the law of return?
the law of return is separate from the general immigration law. Anybody can immigrate to Israel, but you have to go through a process. Whereas the law of return, you basically, it's not overnight, but you essentially once they clear you, yeah, you're in.
Okay, so let's read the law of return for a second. It says,
Okay.
The law of return defines a Jew as an individual who has a Jewish grandmother or mother, or a convert to Judaism who is not a member of another religion. That is what the law of return means.
Okay, and the law of return is not the only pathway to become an immigrant in Israel. There are other pathways available to you as well.
Well, the fact of the matter is that I have no claim or ties to that land. But you know what I can do? I can convert to Judaism and then apply for citizenship and get it. But the people who were actually born in that land, indigenous of that land, don't have those rights. Palestinians
It depends.
that were born and raised and have a genetic connection to that land have less of a right to be in that place than I do, a recent convert of Judaism. How is that fair?
It's fair for two reasons. First of all, it's not the case that every Arab who was born in the region doesn't have access to it. And this segues back to what we were talking about earlier with the quote-unquote ethnic cleansing of the region. If it were true that the radical factions were the ones who had all the power, then there wouldn't have been a single Arab left in Israel after the 1948 war. In reality, over 150,000 of them remained. And the reason they remained was because
after displacing 700,000.
Hold on, TaeTae, it's my turn now. It's my turn. The reason why they were allowed to remain is because these were not the ones who were violent. These were not the ones who were harboring militants who were attempting to carry out a war of extermination against the local Jewish population. It is my opinion, and this opinion seems to have been shared by the international community in 1949 when the UN Security Council ratified Israel's borders following the war. It is my view that if you are in a land and you declare a war of extermination, you attempt to carry out a genocide against your neighbors, then you have surrendered your property rights and you have surrendered your citizenship rights within that region, and you have to go because you attempted to commit a genocide. I don't think that Jews are under any obligation to share a state with people who tried to murder them.
Are you familiar with the definition of genocide?
So there are multiple definitions, but specifically the one that I'm using right now is the more narrow one, where you attempt to exterminate a population's presence in the region, which is what they attempted to do.
Also, a definition of genocide, which means displacing people and forcing them to move somewhere else. And I would say that displacing 700,000 local and native Palestinians is a genocide.
Okay, so I'm gonna use the term.
Let's look at the UN Charter from 1978 that says occupied people, besieged people have the right to armed self-defense. So again, I really have to ask, after genociding a people, when they defend themselves, you are now calling them armed terrorists.
Are we still talking about 1948? Because a moment ago, when I talked about the people who were trying to exterminate the Jews, I am talking about the people who were attempting to, the people who got Nakba'd, the people who got expelled, were by and large the people who were attempting to exterminate the Jews.
Are you saying that so this is recorded. You're saying that 700,000 Palestinians were trying to genocide the newly settled European Jews?
So there were a plurality of circumstances involved. A substantial subset of them were directly involved in the military activity. So I believe it was Higher Arab Committee or the Arab Council. I don't remember the name of it, but the leaders essentially did declare a war of extermination. They used the word war of extermination against the Jews.
And this is after they bought up lands and kicked them out of their home, right?
Correct.
They had the right to do that?
Yes.
According to you?
Yes,
Based on what?
because buying land means that there was a consensual transaction, and now that you're the owner of the land, you get to decide who works
They
on it.
bought land from people that didn't own it. Okay?
That's not correct.
Because the British had already promised that land to the Arabs that fought the Ottomans to kick them out of there.
Yeah, and the British offered a partition, and they rejected it because
Okay,
they
but which
didn't
one
believe
came
it.
first?
Sorry?
Which one came first? Which promise came first? Because
Look,
I
if
know
it-
it wasn't the Jews.
Okay, well, look, if you have a problem with the British, fine, take it up with the British. But
No. I have a problem with the British, right?
okay,
But
so
we
then
are
why
talking
is this
about
why
who
is this
owns the
Israel's?
land.
They both have
Promise that came
legitimate claims to the
first
land.
was to the Palestinian people.
They both
That is the
have
promise
legitimate
that came
claims to.
first.
They both have legitimate claims to the land.
No,
but
they don't.
They
Well,
do.
how are you going to say that they have a legitimate claim over a promise that was made in 1916?
They both have legitimate claim to the land because every
Did they
nation.
promise
Because
the Jews that land
are you
in
going to let me answer your
1916?
question, TaeTae? Come on, you got to let me.
Okay, go
You got to
ahead,
let me
go ahead.
answer.
Sorry, go ahead.
The reason why Jews have a right to the land is because every nation has a right to a state within its ancestral homeland. I believe that the Arabs in the region have that right as well, provided that they are willing to recognize the Jews' right to that land. Their
Says
failure to
who?
recognize that right and their attempts to engage in a campaign of extermination because of how much they don't believe in that right effectively constitutes a surrender of their own right.
So I guess that the Native Americans have the right to genocide us as Americans
There
because they have a right to their ancestral land, right?
there does indeed exist a set of
And
circumstances.
the Black Americans that are here,
TaeTae, you gotta let me finish answering your
they
question.
have the right to go back to Africa and displace and genocide all those people, according to you.
TaeTae, you gotta let me finish answering your questions, otherwise we're not having a discussion.
All right, Casey.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so there do exist circumstances under which, for example, I would accept the existence of a Native American state here in the United States. And it would have to be under parallel conditions. So let's suppose, for the sake of argument, the American empire just collapsed, right? There's no more USA. You just have a bunch of people who are living in this region that was formerly known as the United States of America. And politically speaking, it's no man's land. Yes, people own private property here, but there's no state here. Native Americans are like, hey, there's no state here. So why don't we correct a historic injustice and set up our own state? They go ahead, they get together, they band together, and they make their state. Okay, we are now the nation of Amerindians. We are the Amerindian state. And they decide, hey, we're gonna take a piece of this land, and then everyone else who in the meantime called themselves the New Worlders. There never was a nation called the New World. The New World is a region. Everybody else, the people who were formerly subjects of the American Empire, are now the New Worlders, and they're like, okay, we actually don't want Amerindians to have their own state, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna attempt to exterminate the local Amerindians. If these people, the New Worlders, everyone who's not an Amerindian, now provoke a war in which they explicitly state their intention and act on their intention to exterminate the Amerindian population, and they fail at that task, and the Amerindians then engage in this business. Okay, if you were not violent with us, if you did not attempt to participate in this campaign of extermination, you get to stay within the Amerindian nation as equal citizens with equal rights. Otherwise, if you did engage in a campaign of violence, we're going to send you a few kilometers away to where to the outside of the borders of our state, and you can have New World Donia or whatever. Under this kind of circumstance, which would be the parallel circumstance to what actually happened in the Levant, this seems like an entirely reasonable outcome based on the belligerence of the New Worldists.
This comparison that you are making is patently absurd.
Why?
Casey. Okay.
Why?
Because, like I said, an agreement was made in 1916 to give this land to the Palestinian population that was helping to overthrow the non-Arab Muslim Ottomans. Okay? It was their land. They didn't have a right to sell it to other people and forcibly remove close to 1 million Palestinians.
The
And if
forcible removal happened in
defend
1948 when they attacked.
actually not done. Okay. If you defend their right to do that, okay, you should be vociferously defending Native Americans' right to reclaim this land because they deserve an ancestral land as well. You should also be fighting for the indigenous Canadian population. You should be vociferously arguing for an ancestral home for the Aboriginals in Australia. You're not doing that, and I wonder why. Could it be that these countries are the ones that hold all the capital and hold all the power?
No, the actual reason why is the reason that I gave you a minute ago. It's because the circumstances are not comparable.
You are not admitting the violence of removing close to 1 million people from their land.
On the contrary, I
that they
fully
own.
acknowledge
You
the
cannot
violence.
sit here and
I
tell me
fully
that
100.
they made promises to the Jews when they made promises to the Palestinians first.
TaeTae, the 700,000 people. TaeTae, the 700,000 people who were displaced, they were not displaced over the course of this buying up of land and evicting people. They were displaced during the Nakba. They were displaced when they attempted to wage a campaign of extermination against the local Jewish population, and the Jews kicked them out.
After a whole bunch of violent microaggressions of removing them from their lands.
TaeTae, violent microaggressions. This doesn't warrant pogroms. This doesn't warrant an attempt at extermination. It's kind of shocking to me that you think it is, that buying land and evicting people warrants genocide.
I come into your house, kick you out of every room in that house, and you decide to slap me, and now I've been slapped. Now I get to exterminate you. That is what the Jews did to the
That is not even close, TaeTae. What actually, if you want an accurate analogy, it would be more like this: I buy your house. I decide, okay, it's my house now. I don't want you living in here, so I evict you. Hold on, let me finish, TaeTae. I buy your house. It's my house now. I evict you. I move in my people. You decide, I don't like the new owner, and I don't like the new people who are living in here. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna try to murder them. And then they decide, you know what? No, we're not gonna let you murder us. You shot one of the guys living here, one of my roommates. Now I'm gonna go ahead and shoot you. You stay the hell over there.
Ignoring the fact that I own the house. You didn't buy it from me.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
you didn't get my permission. I own the house, and you decided.
Let me just get this straight.
We're third party and kick me out of my own house.
TaeTae, the land that the Jews bought, that was private property. People are allowed to exchange private property. I don't understand what the problem is here. It's not like TaeTae, it's not like, okay, you have this whole, it's not like the British were giving them pieces of state, right? It's not like, okay, this little piece of state, this is part of the Jewish, and the Jewish nation grows and grows and grows. It was nothing like that.
I actually want to hear from you, Casey, the evidence that this is ancestral Jewish land from the people who are actually being shipped over there and currently live there. Because like I said, given Israeli law on immigration and becoming a citizen, I, an agnostic person or an atheist person, being no member of another religion, I get to decide tomorrow that the Jews had it going on, and I'm going to convert to Judaism, and then I get to go and be a citizen of Israel, having absolutely no connection to that land whatsoever, and I get to work on that land. I get to benefit off of that land. I get to benefit off of the commerce and economy of that land. And yet Palestinians who were born, raised, and have a biological and historical connection to that land are now refugees in their own home.
It didn't have to be that way. They didn't have to attempt to exterminate the local Jews.
No. They were defending themselves.
They were not
against an occupying force.
No,
there was no. They were doing.
No, the Jews were not the occupying force.
Buying up lands that don't belong to you is violence.
No, it's not. It's the exchange of private property. If you're an Arab living in the land, a Jew comes up to you, hey, I want to buy your land. Can you please give me your land? Okay, thank you. This piece of land now belongs to me, a Jew. It doesn't belong to the Jewish nation. Okay, 1925, I buy a piece of property from an Arab. That does not become de facto a piece of Jewish state with its own Jewish laws and its own Jewish sovereignty. It's private property. That's what was going on. You're treating the situation as though Jews were buying up pieces of state.
Private property.
Sorry, could you say that again?
700,000 Palestinians kicked off of private property?
You're
Really?
conflating two different things. TaeTae, you keep jumping around the timeline. The 700,000 Palestinians who were evicted, they were evicted after they attempted to declare a war of extermination. And the reason you're saying that they were justified in attempting to exterminate the Jews because the Jews were engaging in violence by buying up the property, which in your estimation is theft. But you are misunderstanding, TaeTae, what was actually going on, because you seem to think that the buying up of land is like creating pieces of Jewish state. No, they were buying private property. If I buy somebody's house, I'm not creating Crocostan. I'm not creating pieces of Crocostan and imposing my vicious monarchical laws onto other people who are living in the area. I'm buying private property. I'm subject to the laws of the land, same as everybody else.
So then why did they have to say that this process be done
discreetly? Because it's not nice. TaeTae, because it's not nice, and they knew what they were doing wasn't nice. It's not nice to evict people.
Everything that they were doing down, and they did so proudly, because at the time colonialism was the modus operandi of the day, and they had nothing to be ashamed about. Now that we are living in the modern age where we can see for ourselves what that truly is, now all of a sudden, oh no, we didn't colonize anyone. We are just, this is our ancestral home.
TaeTae, it's absurd to characterize this as colonization.
Why you seem to think that this can only apply to the Jews, but everywhere else where this was done, where people were kicked out of their ancestral homes, doesn't seem to be a concern to you. The Aboriginals in Australia don't seem to be a concern to you. The Native Americans,
because it's apples and coconuts. It's apples and coconuts.
That doesn't seem to be a concern to you.
Yeah, it's apples and coconuts for two reasons.
It's actually not.
Number one, I'm answering your question, TaeTae. Number one, the reason why it's apples and coconuts is because the belligerents in those cases were the colonizers, and in this case, the belligerents were the quote unquote native Arab population.
I'm gonna go get Israeli citizenship. I'm a Jew. I've just decided.
You don't TaeTae, you don't even have to convert. Because it seems
live on air. I'm now a Jew. Okay. I will apply for Israeli citizenship.
Great.
And I will get to live amongst the riches of Israel that is backed up by the American taxpayer. And guess who doesn't get to do that? Actual Palestinians.
Okay. So I don't know if you want me to address anything that you said.
Because what I just said, the scenario that I just presented to you is absurd. But
it is, but not for the reasons you seem to think.
You would defend that by saying that this is their ancestral home. Where is the evidence that this is their ancestral home? Where is that? Have they done DNA tests to prove their lineage?
TaeTae, you don't. The fundamental problem here.
TaeTae, and they deserve to be on that land.
TaeTae, can I answer your question? The fundamental problem here is that you don't know what makes a Jew. You seem to think that being a Jew is a matter of having the correct set of genes.
I just read you the law of return. That's Israeli. That is Israeli policy. I just read it to you.
And I just explained to you that that's only one of the pathways to citizenship. But
but it's still a pathway.
Who counts? Yeah, okay, it's one pathway. There are other pathways that as a Jew you can get in without adhering to the religion or having any genetic connection. And the reason for this is because a Jew is not.
You don't have to have a genetic connection, but you are claiming that this is ancestral land.
Yes.
What metric are you using to decide that this is ancestral land to any person who says they're a Jew?
I can tell you if you let me finish.
Okay, go ahead. Let me know.
Okay, so a Jew is not a member of a race, which is what the DNA thing seems to imply, and a Jew is not a member of a religion, as evidenced by the existence of a lot of atheist Jews, present company included. A Jew is a member of a nation.
What is an atheist Jew?
What?
What is an atheist Jew?
An atheist Jew is somebody who does not believe in God, but is nevertheless a member of the Jewish nation. I know this is mind-blowing to you, TaeTae, because you don't actually understand what a Jew is. You think a Jew is a religion like Christianity or Islam, but you're mistaken.
As per Israeli law, by the way. But continue.
It's a sufficient condition, but it's not a necessary one. You can adhere to the Jewish religion, and that can automatically make you a Jew.
Please answer what connects those people to that land.
Sorry?
I said, please answer what connects those people to that land.
Their national ethos.
Are we just throwing out words now?
No, no,
what-
this is me. This is me trying to explain to you what a Jew is, and you're just not listening because like you have this preconceived notion in your head, and you're not receptive to this information. So I'm please asking you, TaeTae, just hear me out as I explain what a Jew is.
Yeah. Tell
Okay.
me what a Jew is.
Okay. So back in the day, up until 600 BCE, with the first Babylonian exile, you had this ancient kingdoms, Judea, the kingdom of Israel. The ancient kingdom of Israel split apart into a northern and southern region. Southern region, Judea, is where the Jews draw their national identity from. The national identity is something that is fundamentally tied to the ethos of the nation, the character of the nation, and is characterized by a common cultural history and a set of practices that are fundamentally tied to the land and have continuously been tied to that land over the course of 2,000 years, even while in exile. So when the Jews were exiled the second time by the Romans in 63 BCE, they went all over the world, right? They went into Europe, and in Europe you have the creation of the Ashkenazi communities. They went to the Middle East. There you had the Mizrahim communities, and you had the Ethiopians. They go down to Ethiopia. They develop their Ethiopian community, and they adopt a whole slew of cultural practices that are associated with the native populations there. But they are still bound to that original land because they have a set of cultural and traditional practices, and they define themselves as a people who yearn to return to their homeland even after being exiled by a conquering imperial power. And this is expressed in all of, not all of the traditions, but what is expressed in all of the traditions and all of the national holidays are events that took place in that land to that people who define themselves as a people who are tied to that land. Over the course of 2,000 years, the religious Jews would every day, 3 times a day, face in the direction of Jerusalem and pray to God and beg him to let them return to the land. They maintained their national identity over the course of 2,000 years of exile. They maintained their ties to the land, both in terms of how they conceived of themselves as a people, regardless of whether they were in the Middle East or in Europe or in Africa. And then on top of that, they also contributed economically because while there were all of these different empires that were subjugating the Jews who were living there and preventing them from, for example, from being allowed to have jobs and therefore not being able to feed themselves, Jews from around the world would send money to the Jews who were living there, who had and maintained a continuous presence in that region, in order to allow them to continue having a presence in that region. So you have 2,000 years of people sending money to the Jews in that land. And over the course of these 2,000 years, all of these Jews, these people, they have their traditional practices that are tied to their national identity as a people in that land. All of the traditions, all of the holidays, and on the religious end of things, all of the prayers that people did, it was all tied to that land.
So what I gather that you're telling me is that a Jewish person is the descendant of a group of people who feel that they're Jewish?
A Jewish person is somebody who has, for lack of a better term, bound his own destiny to the destiny of the Jewish people. This is a person who identifies with the national symbols, with the culture, and with the history of the Jewish people, and has bound his own life, his own destiny to the destiny of this collective group, which has its origins and has its homeland tied to that to that region in the Levant.
So a person who learns the history and attaches themselves to the people who were originally of the Levant is your definition of a Jew.
Not just mine, this is the Jewish nation's definition. And if you adhere to that, you will be allowed into Israel, regardless of what your religion is.
So explain to me how, like I'm 5, right? How someone who feels sympathy for a group of people and, quote, attaches themselves to the history of that people has more claim to people who have been living there for thousands of years.
Sorry, TaeTae, you cut off there. Could you repeat your last?
Explain to me how anything you just described has more claim to that land than people who have been living there for thousands of years.
I don't claim that. I claim that they have a right to that land.
And you are
They
not
have a legitimate. They
that,
have a
that
legitimate claim
right
to that land.
that you say that they have. Based on what? Who gave them that right? To install yourself there based off of a feeling, based off of sympathy that you have for a group of people that lived before any of us were born.
It's
Why
not sympathy.
does someone like that have more claim to that land?
You conceive of yourself as
who are actually living there for thousands of years.
TaeTae, you keep ignoring my answer. I'm not saying that the people.
I am repeating your answer. You said that a Jew, right?
No. The part you're not repeating is when you say they have more of a claim. I never said that they have more of a claim. I said they have a claim.
Why do they have any claim? But who is giving them that claim? Based off of what?
Once again, their right to be in that land is the right of all nations to have a state in their ancestral homeland.
Is it the right of all nations or some nations? Because I have pointed out many groups of people that don't have a claim in their ancestral land.
Yeah, and I pointed out how under parallel circumstances, the collapse of an empire and the formation of a state in the political no man's land, they would be justified in forming a state in their ancestral homeland.
Okay, but Casey, what you explained to me is that me, someone who is American by birth and Nigerian by blood, can turn around tomorrow and say, I feel sympathy for people who lived thousands of years ago that were kicked off that land. I'm going to return to my ancestral home.
It's not about sympathy. It's not about feeling sympathy. Oh, I feel so sorry for. I feel so sorry for. No, it's about.
You said people who attach themselves to those people. Like, that is an arbitrary. What you're saying is so arbitrary, right?
No. This is national.
What is that?
This is constituting your national identity. Your national identity is a voluntary thing,
aka sympathy, right?
I don't understand the use of that word in this context.
Cultivating your national identity, in layman's terms, means what?
It means that you attach yourself to the symbols and to the history and to this collective group as a whole.
How do you attach yourself?
Ideologically.
Ideologically using, so I can say I ideologically attach myself to this group of people. Now,
I mean, you can say that. You can say that, and then you can go to the immigration offices at Israel and say, hey, I have bound my destiny to the destiny of the Jewish people, and they'll say, okay, great, prove it, show it through your actions.
My actions.
You're gonna go through a process. You're gonna demonstrate that these aren't just words, that you're living it, that you are living as a member of that collective.
How does one live attaching your national identity? How does one live that?
That's a very good question, and I think the details
would
probably be
arbitrary.
No, they're not completely arbitrary, because that implies that you could do literally anything to be able to get into Israel, but this isn't actually true. It means that you conceptualize your actions as explicitly Jewish actions. So let's say, for example, you wanted
Jewish actions.
Let's suppose I'm trying to tell you, TaeTae, but you keep
okay.
For example, let's say you want to engage in social justice, as I imagine you do. You conceptualize this in terms of the Hebrew refrain Tikkun Olam, which translates to repair the world. I am a member of the Jewish nation because I have dedicated my life to Tikkun Olam. And I have not merely dedicated my life to, I have conceptualized it in these explicit terms. As a member of the Jewish nation, my actions are reflective of the national ethos of the Jewish people through these actions of social justice. As an example, this would be a piece of evidence you would provide to the immigration offices to say that I am one with the Jewish nation. I have bound my destiny to that of the Jewish nation. Your life becomes...
I do all those things, and then my Nigerian ass can slap myself in that land and say that it is my ancestral home. But people who have lived there for thousands of years and are indigenous of that land cannot do the same.
Yes.
They
do you know why?
have to be occupied.
Do you know why?
I'm sure you're about to tell me, because I have no idea why.
Well, you could know why if you listened earlier when I told you that they surrendered that right when they attempted to commit genocide of their
They did
neighbors.
not surrender anything by defending themselves against colonizers stealing their land.
This was not an active
The
defense. They
UN
were the belligerents.
actually created
Again,
a
there was
charter
again
to
there was no
defend such
no
actions.
no there was no there was no theft of land. All of the land prior to 1948 was bought legally. It was
You
private
have
property.
not proven to me that these people were displaced and kicked off of private land.
Which people?
Land that was, again, in 1916 promised to the Palestinians.
We're talking about private property.
We are talking about the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. That's actually what we're talking about. So you can call it private property, right? Just like I can call myself a Jew. But this land was promised to the Palestinians.
TaeTae, just because the land, the national organization of the land was promised to the Palestinians, that does not suddenly deprive or at the time the Arabs, since they did not yet develop the national identity of Palestinians, that does not deprive the Arabs in the region of the right to sell their private property to the Jews who wanted to come up and buy it. Hey, Jewish person, I was promised to have a nation. I was promised national sovereignty over the land referring to the Levant, but I happen to be a private owner of this piece of private property, this piece of land. I'd like to engage in a transaction with you, Jew. I would like you to give me money, and I will give you this private property.
And these actions,
that's not theft.
And so right that they had to do it discreetly and secretly.
No, the discreet and secret part the discreet and secret part has no relation to the buying part. It's the evicting and the firing of the Arab workers part that they had to do discreetly because they understood that this would cause some consternation. Again, it's not nice, but it's not fucking genocide.
Not nice. Right.
It's not fucking genocide to evict somebody. If you own that property and you evict them, it's not genocide.
We talked about the definition of genocide, and I think that the displacement of nearly 1 million people fits that definition. I know that
you're jumping back and forth again, TaeTae. You're jumping back and forth between timelines.
I'm not jumping back and forth.
You are. The eviction of people, the land purchases and the subsequent evictions, these did not take place in 1948.
Okay,
listen, TaeTae, listen. They happened from the 1880s.
700,000 Palestinians were violently trying to kill the Jews. That's what you have not proven that.
Okay, well, you haven't asked for proof. You haven't asked for proof. You this entire time you've been conflating between peaceful events of buying up private property and then evicting people. You've been conflating that with the Nakba. These are not the same things.
Palestinians were trying to kill Jewish people.
Say again?
I said if you run this recording back, you will see that I asked you in the beginning of this discussion to prove that.
Prove what?
That 700,000 Palestinians were all terrorist fighters trying to kill their Jewish neighbors.
Yeah, I was telling you that a portion of them were trying to engage in the extermination.
So
of
then
Jews.
all of them moved.
Listen,
right?
TaeTae, can I finish?
Skirmishing and fighting and being violent.
TaeTae, you have to let me finish. You can't keep doing this where you ask me a question and then you're not letting me finish.
All right. Well, we have 30 seconds left, so I will let you.
You want me to explain the Nakba in 30 seconds? TaeTae,
I will let you speak uninterrupted, but I think that what you've been saying here about these claims about ancestral land based off of feelings is nonsense.
No, this is just how national identity works, TaeTae.
Okay.
If you're a member of a nation, you have
national identity does not trump people that actually have been living on the land.
Never said it did.
Thousands of years.
They surrendered their right when they attempted genocide of their neighbors. That's the end of it.
Okay, so right now we're going to do questions and answers. So anybody in the chat right now, we have at least 40 minutes to do questions and answers. And that way, either TaeTae or King Crocoduck can answer your questions. So write in the chat your particular questions to those individuals. And I guess I'm going to, look at some of the comments that we have right here. Let's see. I blame Israel. I guess colonizers, they are, wait a second. I'm going to try to click another one right here. Colonizers are biting Cheetos. I think that's in reference to you, TaeTae, is from the finer print.
I don't recall saying Cheetos. Did I say that? I don't get the joke. Sorry.
I think it's a joke. The next thing is like, what is a Jew? I guess that's a question towards you, TaeTae.
So there are two definitions of Jew, I think. The one that I know is a follower of Judaism. Okay. There also seems to be an attempt or a connection to an ethnic identity. So those are the two definitions of Jew that I know. People who are ethnically Jewish based off of a history of a group of people, and people who follow the religion of Judaism.
Okay.
Neither of which are the current Jews in Europe are not the descendants of the people kicked out of Judea. So I just...
That answer neglects, by the way, the Mizrahi Jews who constitute the majority of Israelis, but go off.
All right, the next question is for you, Crocoduck. Is there a legal documentation of the purchase of the land by the Jews that can be cited?
An excellent question, and the answer is yes. The Israeli government has kept copies of all of the land deeds that were legally purchased over that time.
The colonizing government has kept records of the
literally nobody disputes.
Are private, yes.
TaeTae, even the Palestinian side does not dispute that the land purchases were legal. They say it was aggressive, but none of them say that the purchasing of the land was illegal. Like, not even Edward Said or Rashid Khalidi try to argue something like that. Everyone acknowledges the legality of the land purchases. It's not even up for debate.
Please cite your source.
Rashid Khalidi. Khalidi in the 100 Years War on Palestine, book he published in 22. He's a Palestinian scholar. He's on the Palestinian side, and it is a revolting train wreck of propaganda. But even he acknowledges that the purchase of the land was not illegal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sorry, what was his name?
Rashid Khalidi. He's the leading scholar on this topic. He's at Columbia University. And I can't endorse him for the purpose of learning about the topic because I think you're going to gain negative knowledge, but it's better than coming into this blind. So, at least give that a read. So that you
suggested. Okay.
Yeah, read it so that you can at least have a conversation about this.
All right, let's look at some more questions, guys. Keep the questions rolling down in the comment section. That way they can answer as many questions as possible. So a comment that was done by the finer print is that she referred to war as microaggression. I doubt she knows where her elbow is. You want to respond to that?
So we talked about a lot of things. I do remember mentioning the word microaggression, but my point in saying that is that if there were Palestinians that were being violent to the Jews, it's because the Jews were kicking them out of lands that they have lived on for centuries and lands that were promised to them. So this is why I use the word microaggression, because I am not aware of the exact nature of these violent things that Casey is claiming. Okay, and also I are we referring to the Nakba as a war now?
The Nakba took place during the 1948 war.
Oh, okay, I see. Well, these are two different things that I'm talking about. So
yeah, can I just mention the 1929 pogrom of Hebron, which by the way is just one. You could also mention the 1921 pogrom in Gaza. You could mention other things that happened in 1920 and 1925. There's a whole list you could look up. But the ethnic cleansing of ancient Jewish communities. I'm not, when I say ancient, I mean more than 100 years old, because there were Ashkenazi Jews living in Hebron who had been there for 100 years by 1929. And there were also Mizrahim Jews who were living there for at least 800 years, if not for the entirety of the 2,000 years, depending on which family you're talking about. They were ethnically cleansed, not in retaliation for Jews buying up land and evicting Arabs from the land that they legally bought, they were whipped up into a frenzy by their leader, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, al-Husseini, who there's a lot to say about him and his connection to the Nazis and how the Nazi ideology subsequently propagated to the Palestinian people, and this has a large role in explaining why they still have seething genocidal hatred for Jews to this day. But things like this, these incidents of violence that are constantly downplayed by the Palestinian side of this argument, represents an ongoing refusal of the Palestinian side to take responsibility for their atrocities over the course of this entire conflict. Okay, you could name Jewish. You could hold on. You can,
because you say you feel your national identity, right? That's not an atrocity.
No, it's not. It's not an atrocity to say that you have a national identity.
You allow Europe to collectively plant people there because they feel or commit acts of national identity and displace the people that are already there is not an atrocity to you.
No, the displacement.
Okay.
The displacement in the 1920s and 30s, whatever quote unquote displacement took place, the buying up of private property and evicting people, that happens everywhere where there's private property. It happens everywhere, period. Okay, if I own an apartment building and I decide to evict my tenants, I haven't done a colonialism. I've just evicted my tenants. I'm allowed to do that because I own the property. And the Nakba, totally separate thing, had nothing to do with the purchase of land. This was an escalating series of events that fundamentally came down to Arab genocidal aggression against the local Jews.
Let me repeat what you were saying here for clarity. You said that there were private land that Arabs owned and they sold it to Jewish buyers.
Correct.
And then the Jewish buyers kicked them out, and then some portion of the people that were kicked out committed violence against the people who were kicking them out. So that is why they decided to displace nearly 1 million Palestinians, right?
Almost. So there are additional parts to the story that don't really get much detail and which definitely do deserve detail. So approximately the fighting force, I've seen an estimation of around 70,000 Palestinians who were involved in the fighting, so that accounts for about 1/10. This doesn't count their immediate families who would flee with them. This doesn't account for a whole host of things, but there were a lot of things going on. So, for example, this Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, this al-Husseini guy, during the fighting that broke out in Haifa, he broadcast a radio message to the Arabs living there, and he told them that they should just evacuate, wait for the ethnic cleansing, the extermination of the Jews to finish, and then they could return to their home in a few weeks once that extermination campaign had finished. So essentially what happened was the people who, the Arabs who departed Haifa and went off to wherever they went off to, they were effectively complicit in an attempted genocide, and they were treated accordingly.
All right,
so they were not allowed to return.
All right, let's go to the questions and comments right now. So the question for you, King Crocoduck, is who was the land brought from?
The local Arabs.
All right, another question directed towards you. So how many Arab massacres occurred between New Land and 1947?
How many Arab massacres of Arabs or massacres conducted by Arabs? Because the rough timeline on this is Zionist Jews begin arriving in the 1880s. There are already Jews who live in the region. They've lived there continuously.
They were 10% of the population.
Yeah, so they continue coming in, and immigration rates increase because the British are at least initially sympathetic to Zionism. Jews start legally buying up land.
Because they wanted to get rid of the Jews from Europe because they were sick of their presence there.
Yeah, it's true.
Let's not forget.
Yeah,
they all saw an opportunity to rid themselves from the Jewish problem. So basically, it was a more clever Holocaust, right? Instead of killing the Jews, we will just quietly collect them from all the different countries in Europe that their populations are bothering us. Let's just dump them in the middle of the Arab world.
Again, TaeTae, if you're saying that the British were assholes, that the British colonizers were assholes, I 100% agree, and so do the Zionists. That's why they engaged in an insurgency against the British colonizers. But anyway, to answer the question that was posed, the Arab massacres they really started becoming full-blown pogroms 1920 onwards, and I couldn't give you an exact figure. There were dozens of them. In the mid 1930s, mid to late 1930s, they engaged in the Arab Revolt, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Jews, and the violence continued periodically. It died down. It simmered down in the 1940s because at that point Jewish terror organizations formed to begin an insurgency against the British. But Arab terror organizations began renewing attacks on Jewish civilians, and this ultimately escalated into the 1947 Civil War, followed by the 1948 War of Independence.
All right, next question. Okay, TaeTae, is there a record of this promise you keep referring to that can be cited?
Yes, it's called the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence, where they promised sovereignty over those lands to the Arab population that lived there if they helped overthrow the Ottoman Empire. So it's very well documented that was the agreement. They just reneged because they're assholes. They wanted to get rid of the Jews in Europe and put them somewhere else. And they didn't care how many Palestinians would die in order to create a Jewish state elsewhere and out of their hair.
No Palestinian actually had to die. No Palestinian had to be displaced. All they had to do was live peacefully with their neighbors, accept the Palestinian state and accept the Jewish state next to it.
You cannot create a Jewish state without displacing those people. It would not.
Yes, you could.
It would literally not be a Jewish state if it wasn't a Jewish majority, which Herzl wrote in his pamphlet.
Yeah, and he also wrote that this should be done non-violently, which it largely was, and it only became violent when the Arabs attempted genocide.
That this Jewish state could not exist without a Jewish majority. How are you going to get that without displacing them?
Yeah, you get it done peacefully. You get it done by buying up the land legally, and now as the landlord, as the property owner, you can evict people.
Is that a peaceful process?
Yes, because you're not murdering anyone.
Because you bought land?
Yeah, because you're not murdering anyone. If I buy a piece of property right now, if I buy an apartment building and then I evict everybody, I haven't committed violence. I've exercised my property rights.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I love that's the way you see it, but...
That's literally what happened. They bought a property and they evicted the residents.
Peaceful.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can do that too. No one's going to put me in front of the fucking Hague, TaeTae, because I evict tenants from a fucking apartment building.
I'm asking, these lands, were they in the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant?
No, just the Levant, because the Jews don't make any claim to the Arabian Peninsula.
All right, the next question is, we promised former slaves 50 acres and a meal, and we got reneged. What would justify us recently free slaves and attempting to exterminate non-Africans? I'm guessing that question's towards you, TaeTae. TaeTae?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Yeah, the question down there said, we promised former slaves 50 acres and a meal, and they got reneged. What would justify the recently freed slaves in attempting to exterminate non-Africans?
What would justify attempting to exterminate non-Africans?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's a very complicated question, right? Because these people that are slaves were displaced from Africa, right? So I wouldn't say that it justifies murder, right? But we should give them an avenue to recoup their losses and thrive as people. So if they aren't given that avenue and they are forced to live through generations of, I don't know, Jim Crow, systemic racism, things that are purposefully keeping them down in their society, I do think that they may have a claim to kill the people that are oppressing them. I don't think I see anything wrong with that, because that is a very purposeful attempt to keep them as slaves. And we know that that's actually what's still going on in America, right? Because slavery still exists in America through mass incarceration and exploiting the labor of people who do not have that freedom by purposefully and selectively using legislation to cart them in there. So if they want to make the argument that they should kill their oppressors, I think that they have a legitimate argument to make. But I don't think that it is a fair one-to-one comparison, because we are talking about people who are currently, to this very day, living in an open-air prison, being occupied by people who say they have a national affinity to this land. It's not a one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, the reason for the blockade and the occupation of the West Bank have nothing to do with the assertion to Jewish national identity or the right of nations to have a state in their ancestral homeland. These are security measures.
They are occupying them.
These are security measures.
They are security measures. They are occupying them to maintain their illegitimate Jewish state. That's
No. They could end the blockade in Gaza, and they could depart from the West Bank tomorrow if the Palestinians agreed to the three conditions. Number one, ratify the Oslo Accords as you did before. Number two, hold on, TaeTae, let me finish. Number two,
to decide those.
Moderator, wake up.
Right? There are over 10 agreements that Israel also did not agree to. Should we read them? Why aren't we?
You're talking about partition plans. Hold on, TaeTae. You're talking about partition plans. I'm talking about the conditions for there to be actual stability and peace in the region. Okay, you cannot have stability and peace in a region if people don't agree. Number one, ratify the Oslo Accords, which among other things means number two, disavow terrorism, and number three, recognize the right of Israel to exist. Okay, you do these three things. Blockade on Gaza ends right away. West Bank. Negotiations over the situation on the ground has changed. There would have to be some land negotiation. There would have to be some land swaps, and that could be hashed out. But there could be peace in the region. There could be a two-state solution in principle. The problem is Palestinians don't want it. They don't. The problem isn't that Palestinians feel that they have a right to the land and Jews feel they don't have a right to the land. The Jews, by and large, do agree that Palestinians do have a right to the West Bank. They have a right to Gaza. These things should not be occupied. They are only occupied because Palestine consistently engages in acts of terrorism and mass murder.
All right, so the next
If this were not the case, there would be no occupation, there would be no blockade. It is entirely a security self-defense measure.
All right, so the next question towards you, TaeTae, is how many Jews currently live in the Arab world?
I'm not sure how many Jews live in the Arab world. I do know how many Jews live in Israel, which is about 10 or 11 million. But I'm not sure how many Jews live in the Arab world. And I would imagine that Jews that are living outside of Israel within the Arab world, I haven't heard anything about their situation.
Yeah, so with the exception of Iran, which has just a few thousand Jews, for the most part, the Arab world has zero Jews because they ethnically cleansed them. They violently murdered them in pogroms, and then they kicked them out, and these Jews had to go to Israel. And now the Mizrahim, the Middle Eastern Jews, the Jews who do have a closer direct genetic link to the original Israelites than the Ashkenazi for historically contingent reasons. These Jews now constitute the majority of Israel, and they also happen to be the most right-wing. They also happen to be the most fervent Zionists, and the ones who will basically say to you, if you try to say, okay, you Middle Eastern Jews can stay, but the European, quote unquote, the white Jews, they have to go. Chances are these Middle Eastern Jews are going to be like, okay, you're going to have to go through us first if you want to get to our brothers over here.
All right, so the next question is a repeat of the last question. Who promised the land to the Palestinians? I guess you have to repeat the answer again.
The British promised the land to the Palestinians in exchange for their agreement to rebel and fight the Ottoman Empire. They did that. It was Britain that reneged because this guy, Herzl, told them that it would be more lucrative to colonize that area instead, and used that term all over his pamphlet because at the time it wasn't embarrassing to be a colonizer.
So this isn't actually correct. The Balfour Declaration, the Balfour Declaration, as Lord Balfour himself repeatedly said
Did you read
in the
the Jewish
following
script?
years. Yeah, I did. So,
Okay.
and I mentioned
You must
earlier
have missed
why.
all the times it said colonization.
Yeah,
right?
and I mentioned earlier why the extrapolations that you made were not appropriate. You can go back and rewatch because I'm not going to repeat myself. But whatchamacallit, the Balfour Declaration was done for humanitarian purposes. The reason why Lord Balfour put out that declaration, a declaration, by the way, in which he did, you can read the letter of the Balfour Declaration. He did say that this would not displace the rights of the Arabs who were living in the region, the establishment of a Jewish state. The reason why he did it was for humanitarian purposes. He felt bad for the all of the persecution that the Jews had to endure in Europe. He was not trying to ethnically cleanse Europe of its Jews. Now, of course, in any complex act of statecraft, there are a lot of moving parts. So you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of competing motivations. It may well be the case that somebody like Cecil Rhodes supported the creation of the Jewish state because maybe he hated Jews and he wanted them all to go out. I don't know if that was the case with him specifically, but I'm certain that there was some apparatchik in some part of this process who was like, yeah, I really hate Jews. Let's just dump them all over there, right? It's also worth noting that the British also reneged on their promise to create a Jewish state, and this is true in the case when they first tried to propose a unitary state, which is to say a quote-unquote one-state solution, which is to say a non-Jewish state. This was in, I believe, the 30s or the 40s, once they became fervently anti-Zionist. They reneged on this promise, whatchamacallit, when they did not participate, or sorry, when they abstained from the United Nations partition plan vote. And the greatest betrayal happened right in 1939 with the White Paper Declaration, where they severely curtailed Jewish immigration to the land just when they needed it most. If not for this act, the Holocaust may not have even happened. It might have been the case that the Nazi would have been like, okay, let's just send them over to where they're actually from and wash our hands of this. And there would have been no Holocaust.
All right, so the next question towards TaeTae, would it be accurate for you to say that you don't care whether land was brought or taken, you consider it an atrocity either way?
Absolutely. Of course it is. We actually see this in America, right? So wealthy real estate developers decide that they want to gentrify an area, and they just make the conditions there so unbearable so that the land is cheap. They buy it up and they kick those people out, and those people continue to comprise the majority of our homeless population. Now, you can sit here and say, oh, they were just exercising their property rights. You cannot say that that is peaceful. It's exploitative.
That may be the case, TaeTae, but I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't something that warrants a genocidal response.
Right. Okay.
It isn't something that warrants a war of extermination.
All
of us people who were gentrified, all of us people who because of gentrification had to move, we're going to get together and we're going to murder the real estate developers.
Sent there by Europe were being, genocided?
Say again?
It is your contention that Jewish people of the time that were being sent over there and buying up these lands were being genocided? That's your.
It is my contention that in 1948, the Arab League, the leaders of the Arab League, instructed the Arab nations, as well as the people who subsequently started calling themselves Palestinians, to engage in a war of extermination against the Jews in the Levant, which they did attempt, and they did end up murdering entire villages of people.
Were legally or illegally, I'm just taking your word for it, we're buying up the land and kicking those people out with no recourse. With no recourse.
What do you mean with no recourse?
You show up, you buy the land, you kick those people out. What are those people supposed to do? Especially when you do that on such a large scale.
I mean, it did on a large scale. I mean, this process was taking place over the course of decades. I mean, it's not like one day they show up and they buy up all the land and now everybody has nowhere to go. This was a very slow, continuous process, and it was one that was consistently hampered.
Continuously, quote unquote, legally buying up the land that was promised to them by the British, right?
Consistently buying up private property, which the Arabs themselves were selling.
like I said, you can claim that they had the right to do that. But what I'm saying is that that process is not peaceful because you are slowly displacing people from their land and saying, I have a right to do that because I came with my money. Okay. Now, you haven't proven to me that all the people who were the victims of the Nakba were violently attacking these Jewish landowners.
Not all of them. I mentioned what happened with Haifa, if you'll recall.
Okay, so it seems to me like the majority of them weren't violent. They were just displaced anyway.
They were either violent or they were complicit with the violence.
What does that even mean, complicit with the violence?
It means that, for example, as in the case of Haifa, when the Grand Mufti told them, hey, guys, we're going to come in, we're going to ethnically cleanse the Jews, we're going to genocide them all, and then once we're done, you can come back. So why don't you head out? Listen, all you.
Does that mean that I should be kicked out of my house?
Say again?
I said I am complicit with the Palestinians defending themselves. Should I be kicked out of my home too?
So let's have a comparable. Let's have an actual analogy that works here. So let's say you and I are living in the same house. We're roommates. We have our own separate rooms, and then a gunman comes into the house. The gunman says to me, "Hey, I'm gonna go and kill that girl in the other room. Why don't you leave the house? All right, you don't need to be involved in this unpleasant business. I'm going to be shooting all over the place. The bullets, you don't want the bullets to hit you, and you don't want the stench of a corpse to linger in your nose. So why don't you just head out, have a smoke, and come back when I finish?" So I go out. He comes into your room. Unfortunately for him, you happen to have a shotgun pointed at the door, and he gets his ass blown away. I come back and I notice you're very angry at me. Oh, hey, how's it going, TaeTae? Why are you pointing that shotgun at me? Well, Casey, you seem to have conspired with this guy to try to murder me, so why don't you get the hell out of this house? This would be the correct analogy.
Okay, so do you...
All right, so the next question I have for you guys is for both of you. Do you guys think that Hamas really decapitated babies?
I have, so reports of that have not been verified.
We have photos. I could literally send you a photo.
Verified, bro.
I could literally send you a photo.
They have not, yeah, I saw those photos. And a lot of people are saying that those photos were doctored.
Yeah, you know who's saying that.
Official sources have said that the reports have not been verified. So until they're verified, I don't feel comfortable saying that Hamas did that. I'm not saying that Hamas hasn't killed people or hasn't done other things, but you can't make a claim with that like that without verifying it. There's not a single official.
It has been verified by the international press. You just don't want to see it because you understand. I know you understand, TaeTae, how vicious and awful it is for people to engage in what is effectively modern day Holocaust denial. But like there are literally photos. These are not doctored. People do this stupid shit where they put it through this AI test, but they notice that there's like a little there's a little part on the top right corner where
a verified report of that happening, and I will admit that Hamas did that. Until
fair
then,
enough.
I have no idea that they did that.
Fair enough, but it's been around for at least 2 weeks.
If they did do that, I still do not believe that the blame lies with Hamas. The blame lies with the country that is the occupying force. Yeah, that is where the blame lies.
That's horseshit. There's never justification for explicitly targeting civilians.
There's never justification for turning a nation of people into an open air prison, but here we are.
There is if the government that they elected.
Justification for Palestinian babies that die.
For the what?
Right, that for Palestinian babies that are dying slowly and being starved out by this occupation, there's justification for that.
They're
but
not
there's
being
no justification for Israeli babies.
No, the blame for that. No, it is terrible. It is terrible that Palestinian babies are dying. But you need to direct your anger at Hamas.
Yeah, but that wouldn't have happened if the right-wing government of Israel wasn't occupying them.
No, hold on. Israel is not occupying Gaza. Okay,
They are. They control their borders, right? A government that these people do not vote in or participate in control their borders, control their food, control their water, control their electricity. And Palestinian unemployment is nearing 50%.
Yeah, do you know why they control? Do you know why Israel controls Gaza? Do you know why Israel controls Gaza?
They are an occupying force.
Do you know why Israel controls Gaza?
Being an occupying force, all of the deaths that result in these skirmishes lie at the feet of the right-wing government of Israel.
Yeah, no, that's horseshit.
It's not.
TaeTae, do you know
It's
why?
just you
Do you
making
know
a
why Gaza is
calculation
blockaded?
that Israeli babies matter more.
TaeTae, do you know why? Do you know why Gaza is blockaded?
I know why Israel says Gaza is blockaded.
Why does it say Gaza is blockaded?
This is the same Israel that did not agree to over a dozen agreements for peace. So you cannot sit here and tell me, oh, Palestine
do you know
didn't
why?
agree to the Oslo. Israel didn't agree to anything.
Yes, it did.
There are over 10 different truces, treaties, things that have been proposed that Israel has also denied.
Yeah, every example of this has been it's never been the final result of the negotiation process. It has always been a stage in the negotiation process. Right. Subsequent stages Israel agreed to, and then it was Palestine that said no. But putting that off to the side, the reason why you had a blockade over Gaza in the first place is because Hamas has a genocidal charter that explicitly calls for the murder of all of the Jews in the region.
You know,
and hold on, TaeTae, let me fucking finish, dude. You got to stop with this. When they were elected into power in Gaza and immediately started dismantling the infrastructure to begin targeting the civilian population in Israel with rockets, the appropriate response was to put a blockade over them. They are now a hostile foreign nation. They should not be allowed to receive weapons. They should not be allowed to receive ammunition. They should not be allowed to receive any of the shit that allows them to attempt to engage in what they have explicitly said they want to do, which is to murder the Jews in the region. Gaza could have gone its entire existence from 2005 onward. It could have gone its entire existence without a blockade. All it had to do was not attempt to exterminate the Jews. It's really, really easy. Don't try to exterminate the Jews. You don't get a blockade over you. Don't come out and start slaughtering civilians indiscriminately. And we're not going to start pounding your ass. We're not going to start pounding your rockets, which you've embedded within civilian infrastructure to deliberately maximize civilian casualties. We're not going to do that. All you have to do is refrain from slaughtering us. And if you want the blockade lifted, all you have to do, just do the three simple things. It's really easy. Ratify the Oslo Accords, renounce terrorism, and accept Israel's right to exist. Boom, blockade lifted.
So rich for a nation that is occupying a people to tell them that they're the terrorists. Really.
They are.
Not.
Yes,
They're
because
not.
terrorism literally means that in order to achieve your political agenda, you target civilians. They are literally targeting civilians. Okay, it's not like civilians are getting caught in the.
What's happening right now with Israel bombing hospitals and schools and waiting for ambulances to come to pick up the dead and the injured and bombing them again? You don't think that is also committing war crimes?
No, this is
when it's Israel doing it, it's just them defending themselves, right?
This is Hamas propaganda. The bombing of the hospital, for example, that everybody was
That's Hamas propaganda, but unverified reports of beheaded babies is not propaganda.
It is verified. We have international press who have verified it. But putting that off to the side, the Hamas propaganda, which has also been verified as propaganda of the hospital that was supposedly bombed a couple of weeks ago. Where they were able to identify that 500 people had died within 10 minutes of the supposed Israeli rocket falling and demolishing the hospital. Well, next day, hospital is still standing. Turns out that it was the parking lot where an explosion had gone off. International independent. Sorry?
Oh, so that makes it okay.
No, it's not okay. But you know what? It wasn't even Israel's rocket that did it. It was a fucking jihadi rocket. It fell short.
That's actually what's propaganda.
No, it's the truth. It is literally no.
They don't have that kind of capability. They don't have that kind of power.
Are you kidding me, dude?
They're actually smaller than Israeli missiles. Yes.
Literally, every international investigation that has looked into this has verified independently that it was Islamic Jihad. It was one of their rockets that fell into the parking lot. And most
IDF propaganda.
No, this is internationally verified. The U.S., Canada, France, literally everybody who looked into this, everybody who had an outcry after that hospital incident, everyone knows this except for you. Everybody knows that it was Islamic. We have little video footage of it. TaeTae, we have video footage of them launching their own rocket. The rocket falls, it explodes, and it ignites the parking lot in front of the hospital. We have video footage of it. It's out there. You could know this, but you choose not to know this. And I know why you choose not to know this.
So the next question comes directly from Skeptic Fucker. Asked her if she traded the name Jew for black, would it be problematic? It's referring to you, TaeTae.
If I traded the name Jew for black?
Yeah, would it be problematic, according to the question? Yes.
I don't understand the question. The Jews in this case are white. If I were to make any comparison as to who is black here, it would be the Palestinians. So I don't understand the question.
Yeah, that's a really dumb comment because again, the majority of Jews in Israel are Mizrahi.
Bro, you
they're Middle
literally
Eastern.
said that I can identify myself into an ancestral home, and you're calling
Yeah.
my points dumb. Okay.
Yeah, I am because you understand literally nothing about this topic. But the majority of Israelis are Mizrahi. They are Middle Eastern, and there's no shortage of Palestinians who are blonde with blue eyes. So this idea where you're identifying the
So
Palestinian
anyway, like
darker
white
skin,
Europeans send their white European colonizers to colonize non-white people, and then you are asking me to call them black. They're not. So the premise of the question is not understandable. And the guy who literally explained that being a Jew is basically feng shuiing yourself into a place where people used to live doesn't get to call me dumb on anything.
I do get to call you dumb because I
You
keep explaining to
actually
you
don't.
it's
You
a national identity.
don't. But for the
If
sake
you
of
adopt
sympathy, I'm
if
gonna
you
move on.
adopt the national Jewish identity, then you're Jewish. I mean,
Moderator, can you please move on to the next question?
Okay, so the next question is, I guess it's towards you, TaeTae. If a subset of the Black Panthers attempts to kill white, could those whites then kick out all the blacks out of the U.S.? You're right on the perception of collective punishment, which is the problem now.
I don't believe that is fair to then collectively kick out all the blacks. If Black Panthers attempted to kill whites, innocent white people, then you would just punish those Black Panthers who are doing the violence. But you wouldn't say, oh, you were complicit to people who look like you committing violence. You all got to go. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it's co-conspirators who would also go, regardless of whether they specifically engage in the violence. If they were aware that the violence was going to happen,
You haven't proven
they
that
participate,
conspirators.
they participated in some. Yeah, we literally have the radio transmission.
You haven't proven that. That is just your conjecture.
We have literally the radio transmission from the Grand
question?
Mufti of Jerusalem.
Next
No,
question?
you're not interrupting your way out of this. I'm
Next
gonna respond to this. No, fuck this shit. Okay, you answered. Now it's my turn to answer that question.
Why are you getting upset?
It was directed to both of us.
Okay,
you're not letting
guys,
me
guys. No, guys.
You called me dumb. This guy, he literally said you can sympathize your way into Israel.
No, you're the one who uses the word sympathy. You're the one cramming words in my mouth.
Okay, next question.
No, I want to answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay, I get to answer the question as well. Fuck, what even was the question? Okay, Black Panthers. A subset of them decide that they're going to go around start killing white people, right? Okay, you're going to punish those people who are involved, but you're also going to punish the co-conspirators, regardless of whether they were directly involved. And we have the radio transmission from the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. We know that he sent it out. We know he sent that out, and we know that people responded to it. We know that the Arabs who left Haifa, they left because they wanted to make the space for the ethnic cleansing of the Jews in that city. And you could know this too, but you choose not to, and I know why you choose not to. Every Jew knows why.
I actually love hearing the sound of your own voice. Can we move on?
Okay, so the next question is, you know that there were Islam Nazi battalions fighting for the same. I think it's referring to you, TaeTae.
So for me, right, when you decide to colonize a land that is not yours and create living conditions there that are very unbearable and hard to survive in, whatever people do as a response doesn't negate where the blame goes. Okay, so quote Nazi battalions, Muslim people who hate Jewish people for being Jewish, that sort of thing is not happening in a vacuum. That is happening in a situation where Jews are evicting them from their land. So I don't know what you want me to say about that. I really don't. It's just not equal at all.
Okay,
you,
and
you heard it here, folks. If your landlord evicts you, I guess you're justified in killing your landlord.
all right, and the final question before the timer goes off is my question was dead serious. Is TaeTae seriously saying it doesn't matter if land was bought or taken? She consider it an atrocity because my Juden.
I don't know what this last word. What are they talking about at the end?
Uden, this is they're attributing to you probably correctly, even though you'll
So
deny it, anti-Semitism.
so I called it an atrocity, right? Because it is a very clear attempt to kick people off of their ancestral land. That is Palestinian land. Okay? They use their money and the backing of Europe. Okay, I don't know if you want me to continue answering.
Just finish up your final thoughts.
Okay, they use their money and the backing of Europe to legally or illegally, right? I'm taking Casey at his word that it's legal, what property rights or whatever he's saying, right? To remove them from their land. And to me, it is an atrocity. It is not a peaceful action. Okay? If you actually wanted to peacefully remove them, you could have paid them, right?
They did.
No. They paid the property owners. You could have paid the people who are actually living there to move and start over somewhere else. You didn't do that.
But you're not under any obligation to do so.
You quietly, surreptitiously, and secretly paid landowners and then forcibly removed those people.
Yep,
right?
That's how evictions work.
You are arguing that it was their legal right to do that and that it was peaceful. I am saying that it is not peaceful.
Okay, maybe you think it's not peaceful. Fine. It doesn't warrant a genocidal response. It doesn't warrant an attempt at exterminating the Jews in the region.
Oh my gosh. That is
okay. So anyway, guys, that's the question and answer session. So I guess before we sign out, give your final thoughts about this particular topic. I'll give you guys 2 minutes each to finalize your thoughts. So let's start with TaeTae first. 2 minutes.
I think I've been very clear that this land is not Jewish land. This was a very clear, purposeful project in colonizing that land. There is a lot of documentation, pamphlets, memos, writings of them being very transparent of what they were trying to do, because at the time, being a colonizer wasn't unpopular, so they weren't hiding it. This idea that we are going to blame, Britain for everything that happened is nonsense, because Europeans wanted to expel Jews out of Europe and didn't care about the Arab people that would be displaced and killed by doing that. And they are continuing to colonize that land through a brutal occupation and telling them, the victims of that occupation, that they're the terrorists for fighting back. So, I mean, also leveraging your history in Europe and saying that people who criticize this government are anti-Semitic is not working. Like, maybe you can fool, older generations of people who are hooked, who are lost in the sauce of traditional media, right? That's trying to manufacture consent for our money propping up this government. But people who are younger and get their information from less corrupt, more independent sources know what the truth is. And I really am concerned and bothered by this idea that anybody can just convert to Judaism and be part of stealing this land from those people, and can do a set of actions and a set of rituals that prove to the Israeli government that you're Jewish enough to be there. And yet the people who have lived there for thousands of years, people who were born in Jerusalem, because they're Palestinian, have no right to return there. That doesn't make any sense. That process was not peaceful. Colonialization has never been peaceful. We saw it in America. We saw it in South Africa. We saw it in Canada. We saw it in Australia. None of these processes were peaceful. And I really have nothing else to say about it. I know that Casey is going to obfuscate and pretend that, the right-wing government of Israel are the victims, but they are actually the terrorists in this situation. And that has been my stance from the beginning.
All right, go ahead, King Crocoduck.
Yeah, so this isn't about left wing or right wing. I mean, regardless of whether, let me put it this way: everyone on the political spectrum in Israel, left, right, labor, whatever they are, literally all of them will agree that TaeTae is being deeply anti-Semitic when she says that Jews don't have a legitimate claim to the land and that Jews are a colonizing force, among some of the other remarks that she made in this debate. The question of whether the Israeli government should be criticized is entirely separate from the question of whether Israel has any right to exist. And over the course of this debate, what we've essentially heard is that Israel is not a legitimate state and that Jews don't legitimately have a right to have a state in their ancestral homeland. So equivocating between that and criticism of a particular government or particular type of government is obfuscation on TaeTae's part. More obfuscation comes from the mischaracterization of what colonialism is. Colonialism is the exploitation of a native population after subjugating them. Again, there has never been any economic exploitation of the native population, nor has there been any plundering of the land's resources. What you essentially have going on here are two nations with competing claims to the land, and they're engaged in a national struggle. The relation is nation against nation. It's not colonizer against colonized. Framing it as colonizer against colonized is and always has been, as I mentioned in my opening statement, just rhetoric. It's rhetoric that denies the responsibility of Palestinians and their Arabic predecessors when they engaged in institutional violence against Jews, when they ethnically cleansed ancient Jewish communities in the region. And it equivocates between buying up property and evicting people. It equivocates between that and violence. And this equivocation is done strategically for the purpose of justifying genocidal reprisals and attempts at genocidal reprisals, which when they fail, which is what happened in 1948, the attempt at genociding the Jews failed. The people who tried to commit the genocide now get to play the victim and pretend that they're being unfairly put upon. This is horseshit, and I hope that I've convincingly demonstrated that this is horseshit. So, yeah, moral of the story: a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Okay, so if you guys are interested in going to like social media for King Crocoduck and also TaeTae, the links in the description down below. You can find King Crocoduck also on YouTube. TaeTae, do you also have a YouTube? TaeTae?
No, I don't. I just have Twitter. Come find me on Twitter. I am ArchedPickleTae. Yeah, so I don't have any other form of social media. I'm kind of just addicted to Twitter. But yes, thank you for having me. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
All right, thanks everybody for watching, and also be sure to share this stream to everybody you know who's on the pro-Israel side and the pro-Palestine side. That way everybody can be part of the conversation. And thank you guys so much for participating in this debate. I really appreciate you guys coming on. And so take care, everybody.